Lenten materials have been centered around this image of Jesus as the bread of life for 6 weeks now. And so this week, we look into the hard week of trial and mood swings of the community that lead us to Jesus' death. And we hear those words finally spoken into our worship. They said to him, "Sir, give us this bread always." Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." It isn't to the disciples that Jesus is speaking here, but to the crowds of people who were filled to full with a few loaves and a few fish broken and shared. In the miracle of multiplication, Jesus shows all the people an abundance that supersedes calculation. This is the they who speak with Jesus here. They who were fed and are wanting more. They who have received bread for sustenance but are now craving a bread of salvation. Crowds drawn together to hear and see Jesus preaching, who received instead a physical experience and now want so much more. What's important, though, is the reminder that they are still seeking. They received and yet still seek into the next day how to explain the unexplainable so that they can categorize or maybe even reduce this miracle to the comprehensible. They depend on each other in that seeking, too. When they can't understand how Jesus got across the water, they seek out others who might have known or might have helped. And they just keep looking until they find him and reopen this conversation on salvation. Maybe they're already forgetting this perishable bread that they shared the night before, and they go seeking to reaffirm their changed lives. Or maybe it's because their bodies are satiated that they can go to seek Jesus. This might be one of the few times they have known a meal that had no limits, to eat until they could eat no more. This would not have been common for the time, and in many places is still not common now. So maybe they continue to seek, knowing a new kind of investment in this teacher who can change their entire outlook on food, on hunger, on daily tasks. But Jesus does not have easy answers or a welcome for them. Instead, he questions their theological understandings of Moses and pushes them to see something beyond the known patterns of religious life. Jesus' recognition and response to human need is multifaceted. It's compassionate, it's comprehensive, and it's confusing. It's always willing to push further if the faithful are willing to push forward alongside him. As we lead into Holy Week, this passage gets us to know that the bread we have been working toward is finally a bread. It's no longer disparate learnings or stages of production. We can finally confirm it is bread. And if it is to be bread that satisfies the hungry, it will not be a bread that we have worked for, or traded for, or proved that we are worthy of. The bread that satisfies is the one that is to be a freely given gift. This is what this text invites us to see in this week of freely giving, even to the point of death, that God has set up for us in Jesus. With a view to overcoming all of the pressures of the world, even that which kills, God in Jesus offers us a bread that we can never be worthy enough to deserve, and yet which is ours anyway. Grace is ours this week, this day, always. Hosanna in the highest, for sure. Sir, give us this bread always. I am the bread of life, he says. The bread of life. This past week, I tried a new recipe for a kind of bread, as I've encouraged many of you to try throughout this whole season. I tried my hand at a new kind of bun, steamed bun, an egg custard bun this time, Nai Wang Bao. It's a steamed bun, which might be easier if I had a steamer that I trusted. Last time we tried to make buns, however, I found that it had molded. And so, with some ingenuity, I was able to fashion a series of hole-filled metal sheets over my steamer pot so that I could still make the steamed buns. And when it came time to cook this week, I forgot that I had done that. So here I was once again using hole-filled sheets and a steamer tray to make these steamed buns. It came up because when it was time to prep the menu for the week, Tyla asked for steamed buns for lunch, but not pork buns this time. She wanted scrambled eggs inside of it. And so I did a quick search to find and see if there was a recipe for such, and there is, an egg custard bun. And so we tried it. Maybe. We're kind of on on with this recipe. The fascinating thing, though, about steamed buns is how the texture changes. First out of the steamer, at room temperature later, and much later out of the refrigerator. It's as if there are 3 different things you have made, depending upon when you eat it. What was soft and pliable becomes solid, and what was solid becomes hard. It seemed a metaphor for life, too, as I thought about the experience throughout the week. Depending upon the circumstances of our day, our lives, our loves, the texture of our faith changes too. It's made of the same stuff, but it isn't treated the same, and it sometimes is in need of some special preparation. When Jesus says he is the bread of life, maybe this too is part of that same analogy, the life bit. We as believers have to allow God to be present with us when we are cold out of the fridge and when we are warm, fresh out of the steam pot. In the book Cooked by Michael Pollan, he writes that a dough will not achieve a good oven spring unless the baker endows it with internal tension and structure. And maybe that's part of what's happening with these steamed buns. It is the structure that solidifies as life continues. What a role warmth has in our lives, too. Internal tension and structure. This is the hard work of being open to change, being honest with ourselves and our faith story. In the story of Palm Sunday, in the week of celebrating God's incarnation, we have to be gentle with ourselves. We have to realize that we, too, are steamed buns, soft and pliable. We remember that we are a part of that crowd waving palms, excitedly welcoming Jesus to the parade, this parade of alternate power to a world they knew. We can be a part of the crowd, too, who sought Jesus on the shores of this story in John, and the crowd that was fully fed by miracle. In Lent, and particularly in Holy Week, we take our place as part of the crowd. We walk around here as part of the crowd, acknowledging that we are a part of that journey. And we acknowledge our failings and our maybe it worked moments alongside our greatest gifts. And we take our place in the crowds and in the rooms of disciples who did their best to stay committed to this realm of God being created. We too are a part of that crowd who will scream out for his punishment as well. For all of our readiness to accept this bread of renewal into our lives, we also hold ourselves back from fully putting everything into the oven and giving it up to God, to the greater relationship with the divine. So if we are able to be gentle with ourselves, to stretch further, to seek longer, to listen deeper, to be even more vulnerable, we might see that this bread is yet to be still in our hands. The bread is ready for the oven. The crucible of Holy Week will open our hearts to the hard work of God that is seeking us as we seek God. For the bread to be done, it needs internal tension and structure. Jesus tells the crowd, he is bread that does not perish. I am the bread of life, he says. Faith tells us that bread is nourishment for the journey. A journey that emits when we are strained, when we are impossibly laden down, when we are saddened by troubles of grief or stress or injury. Jesus is always present. Bread is there to fill our spiritual stomachs in those moments when we are hungering for something more. The bread that is there in times of celebration, of parade, in times of transition, in the building of families, in the joy of connecting. The bread of life is there to nourish, to sustain, to be freely offered and never for sale. In all times, in all places, Jesus' bread is there before us. Whether it's cold out of the refrigerator, warm out of the oven, yet to be baked. We walk through this week aware of God's bread with us. Sir, give us this bread always. I am the bread of life. May we seek that bread this week. May we welcome ourselves to be bakers. May we realize that we too rest in that spiritual oven. Amen.